Ronan Farrow brought his journalistic, legal and Hollywood background to his role in the downfall of Harvey Weinstein and the rise of the Me Too movement. He also co-authored yesterday's New Yorker expose on New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, who resigned today after 4 women alleged non-consensual physical abuse, allegations Schneiderman vehemently denies. Alongside his investigative journalism, Ronan Farrow has written a new book called War on Peace, The End of Diplomacy and the Decline of American Influence. Emily spoke to him earlier.
Ronan Farrow, your latest scoop, barely 24 hours old, exposes the New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, who championed the Me Too movement as an abuser of women. He denies the allegations, but he's nevertheless resigned from his post. I wonder how that response compares to what you imagine it would have been a year ago.
We're living in a very different climate right now. Each one of the women who spoke out against Eric Schneiderman did so in the face of fear of retaliation, fear that this would mark them forever. And that's a legitimate fear. When you Google an accuser of a high-profile person forevermore, that is one of the parts of their biography that they have to contend with. And I think the difference now is that this is something they understand people will listen to and embrace to an extent that wasn't true before. That doesn't make it easy, but it does mean that they could see a universe in which they would tell these difficult stories, even about someone this powerful, and it would actually have an impact.
We are now at a place where Schneiderman is being investigated. What is your sense of what happens now?
The conduct that these women are alleging is criminal in nature. It's assault, and they have been very painstaking in laying out that this is not, as Eric Schneiderman has claimed in his statements, role play that was consensual in any way. That this is, in their view, clear-cut assault, and that it took place in many cases fully clothed outside of the bedroom. One of these women wasn't even in a relationship with him at all.
Where are we with Weinstein now? Did you think that all these months on he would be facing charges, prosecution?
I will say that I am in touch with law enforcement sources who are working very hard in multiple jurisdictions to ensure that the ball is not dropped as it has been in the past with respect to the Weinstein case. I think that inquiries that are ongoing are correct, and I imagine we'll see motion on that in the months to come. Of course, perhaps one of the ironies of the news of the last 24 hours is that Eric Schneiderman was one of the law enforcement officials investigating Harvey Weinstein and the handling of that case.
We are now at a place where you want to believe everyone who comes to you.
Oh, I wouldn't say that at all.
Okay.
Not even slightly. I do not think it's my job to believe every source that comes my way. And, I have a lot of tough conversations with very brave sources who come to me and tell these stories about exactly this distinction, that they are best served if I am as skeptical as possible and ask as many tough questions as possible.
Your own sister had the experience of not being believed when she came forward. Would you be somebody who encouraged her to keep going on that? Or?
Well, I wasn't. Going back to me on a human level, as opposed to as a reporter, it was a draining experience for our whole family when she came forward. Most of all for her, of course, but these stories of sexual violence are shattering to everyone around a survivor. And so, I think I and probably at various points my mother, questioned, why is it necessary to bring this up again? And she was adamant, and I'm very proud of her that she was. I really learned something from the experience of watching her insist upon raising this again and again until people listened.
And now if you look at what's happened recently, for example, the Academy Awards body has removed Bill Cosby, it's removed Polanski. Do you feel that Woody Allen belongs amongst those names?
It's not for me to say, I think because of those failings of the criminal justice system, as we've seen with Cosby, it can take years and years and years for the truth to come out and for justice to be served. Obviously, my sister's case is one where she is still very much banging her head against the wall trying to be heard. So it's a story that's in a different place.
You might have written a book about the Me Too movement, but in fact, you went to look at diplomacy, a whole other string to your bow, an earlier career with your work in the State Department under the Obama administration with Hillary Clinton. You write about your concern for America's influence. Do you think that its power is diminishing permanently, irrevocably?
This book, War on Peace, is not a eulogy for diplomacy, and if it were, I don't know that I would have written it. It lays out in hopefully acute detail and credibly the depth of the problem. That America is more and more a nation that shoots first and asks questions later, that we don't have our peacemakers that we need, that we don't have negotiators, that we no longer, when we confront a conflict, have the core of experts and strategic thinkers that can keep us out of the line of fire.
We now know that President Trump is pulling America out of the Iran deal completely. What's going to happen?
This is one of the deepest fears of all of the negotiators involved in the Iran deal, but also in the broader community of experts on Iran and beyond. The problem with unilaterally pulling out of the Iran deal is it drives a wedge between the United States and the rest of the Western allies involved in that deal. It calls into question the United States' trustworthiness on its major diplomatic commitments. But worst of all, it sends a clear message to North Korea. Why would the North Koreans ever come to the table, or if there is this meeting between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, why would they ever stick to their commitments if the United States, in an environment where every other power in the world has said Iran is sticking to their commitments in this deal, for all its imperfections, it is working in the narrow way it's supposed to work, why, looking at that, would North Korea ever stick to anything it's committed to?
What if we are in a totally new era where actually calling somebody a dotard, calling somebody a rocket man, actually gets through to the thrust of how diplomacy is done now?
Well, all I can say is the commitments being made by North Korea right now in public statements are ones they have made before. And we've seen that they've lied. This is one of the most wily and most slippery diplomatic opponents we have in the world.
Ronan Farrow. We should, of course, point out that Harvey Weinstein, Eric Schneiderman and Woody Allen deny all abuse accusations against them.